called The Female Literati, Documenting Her Stories. We've got a very interesting session lined up for you. But before that, I'm quickly going to ask this fabulous female literati on my screen to quickly introduce yourself to the audience. We'll start with you, Mini.
Oh my, okay. I have also written down as a backup, so please bear with me. I'm Mini. I've been living in Kochi, India since 2019, before which I was in the UAE for 14 years. My current day job, if I might call it that, is I design dresses for a startup that has been launched with some like-minded friends. We aim to be a collective run by women, creating employment opportunities for women, ensuring them dignity and fair wages. I write and teach. I've been doing that forever, I guess, among other things. I've been writing all my life. It's like breathing. I need to write to survive. But for various reasons, until very recently, I've not been able to give everything to my writing, my personal writing, that is, the time, the attention that it should have received. I'm hopefully going to rectify that. So my published work basically includes poems, a couple of texts for Seagull books, and some short stories for anthologies, including Urban Shorts Crossroads by Grey Oaks. I blog purely because it's often easier for me to express myself in writing than speaking. I have just finished writing the first draft of what I'm taking the liberty to call my first novel. It's about women and the physical and emotional realities of what sometimes happens in the supposedly safe space called home. What else? Yeah, I have also written articles for Gulf News and other publications in the UAE and the larger Gulf, as well as in India. I think that's it about me. Thank you.
That's wonderful, and all the very best for your first novel. It sounds very interesting, Mini. And now we quickly hear from Amrita. Could you just tell a little bit about yourself?
Hello, my name is Amrita Mukherjee. I have written two books mainly. One is Exit Interview, published by Rupa Publications, and the other one is a collection of short stories, the Museum of Memories. It's published by Readomania. And I've been a journalist for a very long time. I've worked in almost all the top publications in India, and I worked in Dubai also. Right now, I'm an independent journalist. I'm a blogger, and I write. And I'm working on my next book of short stories, trying to work on my novel, and failing very badly at time management.
Aren't we all all the best. I'm so glad Deepankar is not here. I think I'm the only one who's never going to introduce herself by saying, I'm working on my next book. And over to you, Piyusha. Can we quickly hear from you?
Me. Thank you, Radhika. It's an absolute honor to be here. I began my journey in 2015, apart from a few anthologies, which I am part of. I have 3 books to my credit. I don't know how they got written or who wrote them even. Just Another Day is a collection of 3 thriller short stories. Then there's Dashavatar, Stories of Lord Vishnu, which, as the name suggests, is a collection of short stories based on the 10 avatars of Lord Vishnu. Both of these books are published by Readomania Publishing. My third book, Dasavatara, published by Westland Publishing under the children's imprint Red Panda, is also based on mythology, but it's specifically for children. I also cannot say that I'm currently working on my next book because I have no idea when that it will finish. Probably somewhere around 2050 or somewhere I will get that done.
I'll follow you at that time only. Don't worry, Piyusha. Yes, we'll publish together.
Yeah. Let's do that as a panel.
That's wonderful. But it's good to have a mythology expert on the panel, actually, because I'm just going to quickly jump right into our discussion. And our first question is partly about that. So, ladies, Shurpanakha is probably one of the most vilified and one of the most demonized female characters in Hindu mythology, right? And for anybody in the audience, the uninitiated, she's this character from Ramayana, Ravan's sister. And she just happens to, I mean, that's the legend, that she happened to see Ram in the forest and she fell for him. And Ram turned her down politely because he was already married. And she then turned her sights to Lakshman, Ram's younger brother, who actually was not that polite in turning her down. So somehow, by the end of this entire episode, Shurpanakha walks up insulted and actually physically injured because Lakshman chops off her nose.
And yes.
But then there are scholars who believe that Shurpanakha was actually a very beautiful, independent, and a strong woman. And the only mistake that she made was that she dared to show her affections for a man. And just for that crime, she supposedly deserves everything that was done to her then, and all that has been done to her name and her legacy ever since, effectively branding her as a first-grade vamp. Nobody ever would name their daughter Shurpanakha. Also, barely just a few weeks ago, a girl named Shweta in India forgot to mute herself on a group Zoom call when she was discussing the sexual exploits of a male friend to another female friend. And within a few hours, this poor girl, she'd been gifted a legacy of internet infamy that she will find hard to live down for the rest of her life. Now, the irony is that Shweta would be judged far more for talking about what this boy did than this boy would ever be judged about for actually doing it. Quite like Lakshman, who never got judged for what I can only call an absolutely uncalled for violence against a woman. And Shurpanakha is judged till date. So this question is for you, Piyusha, because you're our in-house mythology expert. How can we tell our stories, Piyusha, when the cards are so steeply stacked against us? I mean, all these people, they've clearly decided to brand us as the bad ones. Who is even going to listen to our stories when we're going to retell them?
It's hard, Radhika, and it's like screaming into an abyss. It makes you wonder exactly what you said. Who's going to listen to us? Is anyone listening to us? Does anyone even care? And I think that's the challenge we have in front of us. We have to get them to care. If that means continuing to speak, so be it. I keep saying this. I am speaking up because I want to, not because I want to change the world or not because I want to change anybody else. I'm not preaching anything to anyone at all. If someone reads my writing and is inspired to ask questions or from what I've written is prompted to think differently, then the credit goes to them. My aim was simply to put what I want to say out there. In the example of Shurpanakha that you gave, the narrative is predominantly from a male perspective and specific to a certain region. I'm sure the narrative would be very different if it's from Shurpanakha's perspective. In fact, in the previous panel, we were talking about Arpita wanting to write that story.
Yes.
And
yes, she was.
Unless she gets that story out, we don't know what her perspective is. So I think for all of us, for all women, including Shurpanakha, I think the biggest mistake was daring to desire, not being submissive enough. Our behavior or her behavior doesn't conform to what the prescribed code of conduct is for women. And this is where the entire rape culture and slut shaming comes from, because women who dare to be different must be put in their place or, demonized or kind of taught the right way to behave. And this is exactly what Lakshman does with his gruesome act of violence. For some reason, it's less violent. It seems less violent than Shurpanakha's act of desiring. And we forget what Lakshman did. We keep, pointing our fingers at Shurpanakha. The whole contrast of the two women, because you're talking about mythology, the whole contrast of these two women is very striking. There's Sita being this pious wife and Shurpanakha being the demoness is the vamp. I think it relates to this expectation of how women should behave, which again, relates to the Zoom call that you mentioned about. Shweta talking about what that boy did is our problem. What that boy did, or even what the person who recorded that conversation and put it up on the net is conveniently forgotten. So it's as if all the odds are stacked against women, and they are wrong no matter what you say or do. And if women do dare to speak up, if we do say that you're wrong, we need feminism, we need feminists, there's this whole brigade screaming men too, or not all men, and they gaslight and mansplain. And there's every tactic that they use to silence the voices of women. So I guess coming back to what I said in the beginning, it's like screaming into an abyss, but the only solution is to keep talking. Just keep talking in discussions like this, public forums, family gatherings, with friends, with colleagues, with relatives. Just keep speaking until people are forced to listen. Of course, there's going to be ridicule. Of course, there's going to be people saying things like feminism is cancer. That's an actual hashtag on Twitter. It's hashtag feminism is cancer. But we have to put out hashtags like feminism rocks or gender equality or whatever we want to say.
Wonderfully put, Krishna. I completely agree. We cannot be quiet just because somebody is trying to make us quiet. Wonderful. And I think, Mini, at this I'm going to come to you because you are working on your magnum opus right now. It's a big, exciting time in your life. And also your story is based within a home, and it's based within a confines where we're supposed to be safe and we're supposed to be comfortable, but more often than not, we're not. So what do you have to say on the subject? What do you have to say about the Shurpanakhas and the Shwetas and the Lakshmans and the boy who still is unnamed, by the way, who put that Zoom call online? We should know the name of the boy. Yes, Mini.
Yeah. But that has been the way, I have heard men dismiss, trivialize the stories of women, of abuse, for instance. I've always seen them trivialize it. It has happened with me too. But like I was thinking of it the other day, and it's like there's a difference. The vulnerability, and our society is patriarchal, and it's a fact. However much you claim to be liberated or whatever, we still fall prey to that patriarchy. And when women's stories are trivialized, I think you are taking away the power from them. You can't even complain because, it has happened to me too. So what's the big deal? No, there are restrictions that come with just being a woman, which is often not appreciated enough or not heard enough. And interestingly, coming back to Shurpanakha, I've always noticed that what is seen as strength in a man is seen as aggression in a woman. The very same thing.
Exactly.
You have,
Absolutely.
The whole Hollywood running after women, the male Hollywood running after, showing visuals of how cool it is to stalk women and, win their love or whatever you call it. But when Shurpanakha did it, it became something that deserved violence. Isn't that interesting? The way the society views things. And okay, let's put aside the extremes, the aggression. I would like not just those voices that rise in rage to be heard. I would also love it if we have an audience for those other voices, like the ones who are, say, quietly confident or shy, or like in Arundhati Roy's term, the ones that are deliberately silenced, or the voiceless. That she says that there's no such thing as voiceless, there are only deliberately silenced. So those ones also should get a chance to be heard. And I think as writers or as women, who believe in, I wouldn't call it equality, I would rather go for equity. That's a better term I prefer. So as women who believe in a kind of, in ourselves rather, there was this very interesting definition of feminism that I was told when I was a part of a panel in something. They say that femin is woman and ism is belief. So feminism is merely belief in women. I would like that definition to be understood first. It's not anger. It's more than that. It's just belief that women are people. We are not something to be marginalized. And I think until we have an audience, until we make that thought mainstream, we will have to work. As writers, as women, as people, we will have to keep talking for us, talking for others who don't have the voice to speak. I think we are privileged in that sense. So it's our job to speak up, is what I feel.
I completely agree. I think having a voice and being able to put it out there is a privilege. And kudos to all of us for at least making an effort to do that. Moving right along, so clearly I get from your points that we cannot be quiet, we have to keep telling our stories, which takes me to the next segment of the discussion. Now, this one was something I originally planned to ask Kirti Jaikumar, who unfortunately couldn't join us, but I would like to hear your thoughts on it. So essentially what we're talking about here is rewriting history and making it her story, right? Which is all wonderful. But I think the books that most of us write or read or talk about at events like this cater to a largely adult audience. And I remember reading this statistics somewhere, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, that currently there are about 1.1 billion girls under the age of 17 in the schools all over the world. Maybe it doesn't mean much standalone, but then I read something else also, which says that about 15% of history that is taught in American schools is about women of significance, women who contributed to history and changed it significantly. But even out of that tiny sliver of 15%, 60% of it shows them as in domestic or supportive roles, that this is how they help their husband achieve their goals, and this is how they help their husband make history. So which is, I think, basically just a euphemism for saying they didn't do much. All right, they were just there in the story. When I put these two things, yes, you were in the background. So when I put these two things together, I come to realize that when these 1.1 billion girls go to school, they read a history which is essentially devoid of women's names, their stories, their struggles, their contributions. Basically, we don't exist in that history, which means a lot of them might walk away thinking, you know what, no matter what I do, my contributions are not going to amount to much. I will never make it to the history books. And I think that is a profound sentiment to live with. It is enough to crush many a dream. So for this, what my question to you is, first of all, what are your thoughts on this matter? And shouldn't this 1.1 billion girls be our primary audience when we're trying to retell these stories? Any one of you can take this first.
Yeah, I can talk about this, Radhika. Firstly, I feel that 17-year-olds, old girls these days, they think very differently. They are the last people to believe that whatever they're taught in school or whatever history is telling them, they are not going to believe that. They have their own belief and they go ahead with that. They have a mind of their own, which is fantastic, and which is so different from when we were 17. Like our growing up years and 17-year-old girls now, it's a like totally different. And I'm sure Mini, who's a teacher, and Piyusha, who's also into teaching, they are seeing girls of this age. They will be able to tell better. This is one thing that I don't think reading history would decide what they're thinking, because they are also exposed to other channels, which could be like television, newspapers, and mainly online, and they're like, so like I know some girls who are like coming from very economically backward families. They're part of a certain program, and I find it amazing how they are fighting, their conservative backgrounds every day to be who they are. And it gives so much hope, you think that you're building a different society altogether. This is one point. And another point is, it's also in our hands as writers, as mothers, as teachers, to give a different perspective of history to people we interact with. Like when my son is reading the Mahabharata, no one ever told me, like, look at Surpanakha in a different way, or look at Hidimba in a different way. But I have discussions with my son, and he looks at Surpanakha from a different perspective. And Hidimba, yesterday we were talking about Hidimba, that what a role she has in Mahabharata, she has been completely put in the shadows, and how she, Ghatotkacha, she had such a huge, she was so selfless. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. So these are the things, this is our, this should be our role, and through teaching, our role should start from home, and then we should go on and write about it, and maybe like nowadays people are writing different histories like this. People are writing about the different perspective of how we looked at Sita, and women have stories stories about Sita, about Draupadi, about Chitra Divakaruni Banerjee's books, these things. So we are rewriting history in a way, and that's that children are now exposed to that. I mean, not even 17-year-old, like they're 10-year or 12 years, and they're reading the different perspectives. They're exposed to a different perspective, and that is very important. That's already started. Is Radhika not there?
I think our moderator only got disconnected.
Yes, I think she. Okay, we can continue. Let her come back.
Yes, I just wanted to say something, if I may, because we were talking about feminism and speaking up, and something Mini said reminded me of this, tendency of people to talk about wanting to move away from feminism, and I've heard this many times. They say I'm a humanist, or I believe in humanism, and I don't even understand what that means, because
how is it different?
What is the difference exactly, one, and what is the problem you have with the word feminism?
Exactly. It's like you're saying the F word, a different F word, that's how people treat it sometimes. Even
it's the belief that women speaking up, or women, if you talk about gender equality, it's not just about women, which is what we are also saying. We're talking about all genders, we're talking about intersectional feminism, but these people insist it being, something that they want to not associate with. For whatever reasons, it's been badmouthed, it's been, completely misrepresented, and I don't understand what this is all about. I wish I had an answer to that. I don't.
Celebrities. I've heard of celebrities saying, I'm not a feminist, but I believe in XYZ.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's extremely damaging to our movement of gender equality. And Radhika is back.
How can you not be a feminist and believe in humanism is something I could never figure out. I can't figure that out. Yeah.
Okay.
And,
I'm terribly sorry.
Coming back to what Amrita was saying, may I say something?
Yes.
Coming
please.
to what Amrita was saying just now.
Yes, Mini, please go ahead.
I was thinking, there is a certain, regardless of all that, what you said is right. We have now way more opportunities than we had in the past to present a different version of mythology or history or whatever. But we also need to consider that that is, again, a privilege restricted to few.
Right. Absolutely.
The larger public goes by what is written in the history book. So I would consider carefully choosing textbooks, educating or spreading awareness among teachers, very, very important. Ask teachers to encourage classroom discussions on perspectives. Those things, as a teacher, I'm talking from the point of view of a teacher, because I know for a fact that a teacher holds a lot of power inside the classroom.
Absolutely.
So that power has to be used for the good, rather than to just propagate the same narrative. So, so yes, education has its place. Yes.
Yes, and I'm so sorry, ladies. First of all, power cut. So apparently, in the long list of obstacles that we have to cross in order to get our voice out, power cut is also one of them. So I'm just going to add that to the list. But you ladies proved another point that a wonderful panel does not need a moderator. So you guys kept the conversation going even further.
We missed you. We missed you.
I am back now. I'm going to try and justify my position here by asking you guys another question as a follow-up to what we were discussing earlier. So clearly the consensus is, as Amrita said, as Mini also said, that their primary source of stories are not just the history books that they read. They are their mothers, their aunts, who are first of all living wonderful lives, and also sharing them information about wonderful women around the world. As teachers have a responsibility of bringing all the stories. And while I was researching more on this subject, it actually took me to the works of one Dr. Emily Kirschbaum, who's actually the founder of Remember the Ladies. And this is apparently a non-profit which helps teachers and school districts provide more representative and more inclusive histories to young girls and women. And I loved something that she said, and here I quote her, you cannot become what you cannot see. So clearly there's so many other ways to make these girls see these women and then aspire to become like that. So I'm quickly going to come to you, Piyusha, with this. Dr. Krishna believes that her work is not just about rewriting history. In fact, it's not that at all. His work is to supplement history, to supplement it with the stories that have been missing for far too long. Do you agree with her statement?
I do. In mythology, there's this saying or belief that there's only one truth, and it is which is not known to you. So I believe every story, every incident has different ways and perspectives of looking at things, and it's what completes the whole picture. In fact, I'm glad that you mentioned this, non-profit Remember the Ladies, which helps teachers in school to provide more representation and inclusive stories, because Kirti is not here and she's being missed greatly, but one of her books does exactly that. The Game Changers is about women in past and present day who are continuing the work forward of, bringing these stories forward, and whatever inclusions, movements, all the hard work of these women who've been forgotten along the way. She's bringing those stories back into public domain and public memory, and I think that's fabulous. So yes, it's not just about rewriting history, but also about bringing forth the hidden truths and the hidden women and what their contribution has been along the way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And yes, Kriti is being terribly missed. I keep on flipping my screen to see if she's there so that I can quickly pull her into the conversation. But yes, the stories that need to be reverberating around the world and are not even being talked about, that actually is a good fodder for us mothers, for us teachers to dig into, and of course for authors to dig into and keep on presenting to these girls, which is again wonderful. But the reluctant optimist in me is going to put forward another question to you women, because there's a world that we want to live in and there's a world that we do live in. All right, so let's talk about the world that we do live in. When Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo, they won the husband-wife duo, when they won their Nobel Prize, we all know that the majority of news channels, majority of headlines just completely forgot about Esther Duflo, right? And for all her hard work and for all her remarkable intelligence, the only thing that she got in the headlines was, and his wife. That's what she won, right? And very few bothered to mention that she was the youngest recipient, and I think the second only woman to win a Nobel Prize in economics, while Abhijit was one amongst 80 plus men, like 90 economists have won it, so the rest of them are all men. And of course, there was a lot of outrage on Twitter and social media, and then of course there was the post-outrage change in tonality. But this was the first instinct of people of how to report this story. And while I do not want to say that any of it doesn't take any luster away from Abhijit's achievement that he was one amongst those 80, those 80 men. But did Esther not deserve at least a bit of a spotlight for what she did? And so, of course, Amrita, you're the best person to answer this question for us, because you are a journalist and you are documenting our present. My question to you is this world even ready to hear us retelling history when it comes so naturally to them to even deny us our present?
I think, the whole owners should rely on the editor and the journalist who did that. It's really bad journalism. I mean, we cannot imagine that something like that can be done. It's terrible journalism, and you cannot take away from Esther what she's done.
But integrity, right? So I'm going to take a guess and say they were men.
Yeah, maybe. But you don't know, Radhika. Maybe the headline was given by a woman who was lazy enough not to check who the wife is. That's what journalism has come to today. So apart from that, when Esther Duflo got the Nobel, Abhijit Banerjee had all my interest because he's from my school and from my college. But when they're doing that first speech in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, I went to watch them, and I was like hearing Esther talk, and I was like, oh my God, what a woman. I mean, how she talks, she's like stunning. She's so confident. So, you go like gaga over her. It's like that. And then she got my interest instantly. I started researching on her, like, who is this lady? I am afraid I didn't know too much about her. But then I realized that it's my what will I say? That it's my negative aspect that I don't know about her, but the world, the people in her field do know about her. And there have been articles way back in 2010, 2011, which say that Esther Duflo is in the running for the Nobel Prize. So, it's like maybe it's how the world looks at things, but the right people and the right people know, and the women who are working at that position and working hard, I think they just can't care any less, like who mentions them as a wife and mentions them as a, they just do their work and they are the achievers and they're like absolutely fine. But another thing that I feel is, this is an instinct that we have when it comes to women and achievement. I'm sure you had heard this Indra Nooyi incident when the day she became a CEO, she came back home and her mom told her that go and get the milk first. But I think this is a reality that all women face. This is a reality we might not be talking too much about, but it's like, okay, you are first the mother, the wife, the homemaker, whatever, then go and do what you have to do. So it's always there. We might not be talking about it, might not be discussing it too much, but it's something we all are facing all the time. Like even as a daughter, like whatever, it's there. That what a man, like I was reading that how much difficult the life of a woman writer is than a male writer, because women are always looking at handling, even if you're married, if you're not married, you have so much other things to think about. It's not like you just come home and sit to write and you lock yourself in a room and you're writing all day. It never happens that way. So it's like we're always struggling with our time. But despite that, when we achieve, and whatever the small, like as Minnie was saying, like the shy woman, the introvert woman, the quiet woman, but everybody has their small achievements and they are doing it quietly and very consistently. And that is what really matters. And if bad journalism happens, just let it be. Esther Duflo will be Esther Duflo for me. That's all.
How wonderfully put. No, I completely agree with you. And the other thing that's happening in the digital era, and again, in the world of Twitter and everything, they could write bad headlines, but one Twitter hashtag and it's going to take over all their bad headlines, and they had to go back and change their tonality.
Exactly.
That's something I love about Twitter. You can actually create a storm, and that's really. And one thing. Sorry, may I?
No, I'm sorry. I think my net is still not perfect, so I am getting a bit of a delay. So I'm going to quickly move along to the next thing.
I think Minnie wants to say something. Radhika, Minnie wants to say something.
Oh yes, Minnie, please go ahead.
No, I was thinking about even when you write or speak about women's achievements, two things bother me. One is the tone of surprise, and second is the conjunction they use. I'm an English teacher, so, I really am worried about the conjunction. It's always despite being a woman. I don't like that. Why can't it be because I'm a woman, I'm able to do this? So that is always something that has bothered me, that tone of surprise, and that said or unsaid, it might be just implied, but there is this thing that despite being a woman, she has managed to achieve that. No, we are cool. We can do things. Why isn't it mainstream? Why is it despite? I think is something.
I'm sorry,
this is something I always.
And the internet is not being nice.
This is something. Sorry, Minnie, this is something I keep telling my son, be smart like a woman. What?
Yes, we smile like a woman. I think them also using despite is, I think, a Freudian slip, because they're trying to say, see, we made it so hard for them and they still managed to do this. So I would call it a Freudian slip.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Yes.
Yeah, and I love the idea that is the standard that you're setting for your son, Amrita. And I think that's pretty much for everything else that we cannot control. There is one thing that we mothers can control, and that is how we raise our children. And I think there's an added responsibility to their boys. And what I keep on telling my husband all the time is that if my son grows up to be the man that I have lamented all my life, then I would have failed as a mother, I would have failed as a woman, I would have failed as a feminist. But it also gives me an incredible sense of hope that I have the sphere of control and I'm going to work on that. So quickly moving along with that, I think what I'm getting from you guys is a lot of sense of positivity that yes, there is some faulty documentation still happening. People would still give us their despites and their conjunctions. But we will still continue doing. And I think we saw that happening live. We're still seeing it happening live all around us in the world, because for the first time, the world has been hit by something that, first of all, we still don't understand. We definitely are not capacitated to handle. And almost anywhere and everywhere, everybody is struggling. But the people who did not struggle were the female world leaders. So in this continued thread of what's this pandemic is, I still don't understand what this pandemic is. I think we saw a watershed moment in the history of world politics. And that was the fact that women leaders did a fabulous job. And at least some parts of the world talked about it, and some parts of the world documented it. And this question is to open to anyone who wants to contribute to this. How can we make sure that these stories don't just die right now, that they do become a big movement, that we do finally make the world accept women can make great political leaders, let's get them more into the political scenario. We need more Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes, and we need more Sania Marins.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I've been doing some reading up on that. Yes, it has been a watershed moment, a watershed era, actually. This has been something no one could have predicted. And it has upended our ideas of what normal is in so many ways. Yeah. And one of them is this idea that women may be good for X, Y, Z, but men make better political leaders. That idea has been completely turned on its, it has been upended, like it's standing on its head now. So that's the best thing to come out of this whole pandemic, I guess. It has been like women actually are heads of state in only 21 countries in the world. And interestingly, those 21 countries have been the ones that have handled the pandemic better than the others. So, and, it can be New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern, and our Kerala has our health minister, Shailaja Teacher, who did a fantastic job containing this situation. And prior to that, another deadly virus, Nipah virus. And interestingly, women, according to the UN Women Policy Brief, I quote here, they have the leadership styles of women leaders in the COVID-19 response have been more collective than individual, more collaborative than competitive, and more coaching than commanding. I loved that statement because that sums everything up. That is why we were successful. It isn't about me, it's about us. It's about empathy. It's about a scientific temper. And we have shown that we are capable of that. And how, and we've come out larger and more effective than the men leaders around the world. And I am incredibly proud of that. And, the question as to whether this fact has been recorded, documented for posterity. Yes, there have been a lot of studies going on. There has been a lot of white papers and articles being written, but it's mostly very niche. It isn't mainstream discussion. I have seen a Harvard Business Review article. I have seen UN policy brief. I've seen small articles on the topic, but I have not come across a front page news on how women handle pandemic better. Not even a third page news for that matter. So it is not a part of the mainstream discussion. And that is worrisome. And for me, I think the answer is simple. Start conversations. Let's have a lot of conversations. Let's have art and literature on that. Let's have paintings. Let's have performance art, everything on this. Let's have history and civics lessons on this. Take it to the textbooks. I think that is the best way to ensure that it's not forgotten. Take it to the textbooks. It can be there as part of literature. It can be there as part of civics. It can be there as part of politics, psychology, whatever. But take it to the textbooks at school level and beyond. If we are able to ensure that, then this won't be forgotten. It can indeed be a lesson ahead. You know what I mean? If our children grow up reading about how good we are, how women are not women, but people, we are as effective as anybody else. If our children mainstream us rather than despite and, wow, she's a woman, still she did this. If we can take out that tone of surprise from that, I think we are successful. So that's what I would like, write it into the textbooks, have classroom discussions, essay writing competitions, debates, lectures, workshops, seminars. That's the way forward to ensure that we are heard, that there are conversations. I'm sorry, I'm a bit passionate about this.
No, that was wonderful. And I love your idea of taking that whole thing viral in the old school sense, all right? So without the hashtag, let's take it to the ground level and let's make it viral in the classroom. Let's make them write essays about it, research more. And I think that's a great idea. Just the other day, I was just having a joke with my husband and I said, you know what? The biggest way that people are going to realize that women are the best world leaders is that from now on, when Bollywood makes all those dystopian movies or all those asteroids crashing in the world, everything, the president is always going to be a woman, because for the first time they have realized men cannot handle it. The first time something really bad happened, the women came to force. So from now on, whenever there's a remake of Armageddon, Deep Impact, and whatever have you, Independence Day, the presidents are going to be women.
And they would need the military to contain it, I'm sure.
I would quickly like your thoughts on this, Piyusha, as well, in terms of what more can we do to make these stories, like I said, go viral?
Yeah, also I want to, before I just answer this specific question, I want to also add to what we spoke about earlier, that Esther DeFilo was completely ignored and sidelined. I think for all of us, the default is patriarchy. And we forget that women actually do exist and have a strong, important role in contributing to the success of everyone around them. So we have to make sure that we keep speaking up. For example, the Me Too movement. It's been happening since forever. Sexual harassment isn't something that's new. We've always known about it. We've always experienced it, but nobody was willing to talk about it until Tarana Burke made it, cool to talk about it, is what I would say. It's not cool, sorry, that probably sounds insensitive, but yeah, the solidarity that came across in sharing stories. Sorry?
That she made it okay to talk about. She said, okay, yes, we can talk about.
Yes. And I was, wondering, because you're talking about the stories of these women being sidelined and being forgotten. I was just thinking, what if we have, because we need to keep talking about it, we need to keep asserting ourselves, we need to own our stories. So how do we take these stories to the schools? How do we take it to the public around us? We have to own these stories. And I'm so glad to share that while we were having this discussion, I just quickly went on to Google and checked. I think it was an update that came about 12 hours ago. She's going to have her own memoir released soon. And that's amazing, I think, because we need those stories to come out. We need these.
Who is going to have her memoir?
Tarana Burke, the Me Too founder. The founder is the one who started the whole movement, and it snowballed into millions of women talking about their personal stories. Right. And we were finally forced to sit up and listen. So I think the world is such that patriarchy is the default. the oppressors continue to preach how the oppressed must behave, and they are the oppressed is the women who are oppressed and other marginalized communities who are being oppressed are the ones who are expected to be polite and listen and be kind. But
we understand.
And there's nobody willing to listen. So we just have to keep asserting ourselves, keep speaking up, keep owning our stories. And unless we do that, nobody is anyway willing to listen. So we might as well, sit them down, probably tie them up in a chair and say, now you better listen to us.
But that's what's happening.
Yeah, we need to keep doing that. We need to keep doing that is what I mean.
Absolutely. I was in a cafe a few days back, and in Calcutta, like there were loads of women walking in, and the few guys who were there in the cafe, like it seemed like it was a good feeling, because when we were young, we could not imagine a scenario like this, like girl gangs walking in and one or two guys sitting in a cafe. But I really like this turn of what will I say, this social situation that women are like out and enjoying, and like they can't care less. And I really like this situation that's happened, the turn of social perspective. So it's like, I guess we have managed to do what you were saying, like make them sit and listen to us.
To a certain
as much as I am enjoying listening to this, I'm the moderator, and the worst part of being a moderator is that just when you start to enjoy a discussion, you have to let them know that the time is over. But ladies, you have been fantastic. And of course, Kirti and Faika were sorely missed. But at the same time, I think the inputs that you've shared with us and our audience, they are fantastic. And I think here's to all the women who would not shut up. And here's to all the women who will not sit on a chair quietly. And even if they tie us to a chair, I hope we have a pocket knife. We know how to use that and break ourselves free. Thank you so much for your time, ladies. And I would like to thank Ananke and Sabeen for this wonderful platform that they've created for these fantastic discussions that we all are learning a lot from.